Hi everybody, my name is Krista Loos. I'm one of the outpatient dietitians here at KSB. Today I wanted to do part one of a sports nutrition series. So the next one will be coming in September, so look out for part two. But wanted to start with just a little bit of an intro to sports nutrition, give a few tips for pre-workout fueling, kind of talk about why nutrition in a sports setting is important or what role it kind of has there, and then overview a few of the athletes' plates, which helps give guidance as to things we want to incorporate at our meal times, depending on what our training load might be. So why nutrition matters in a sports environment or sports setting. One, we want to make sure we're meeting nutrition needs overall. So even outside of activity, our body needs food or energy coming in to help support physiological function. So number one, we want to make sure we're meeting nutrition needs, supporting activity load. So as our training or activity is increasing, we are using more and more energy. So we want to make sure we're eating enough to support that activity load. Support recovery overall. So food plays a very important role in rebuilding, repairing muscle, recovering from bouts of activity that we've done, whether that is workouts in the gym, sports training, recovery sessions, PT sessions. We want to make sure that we have enough to be able to support that recovery. We want to prevent dehydration. When we are sweating, we are losing a ton of fluids in that process for body cooling. We're also losing a lot of electrolytes in our sweat, the main one being sodium or salt. So we really want to make sure we're on top of getting enough fluids coming in, enough electrolytes to help prevent dehydration. As in situations in dehydration, we do have negative impacts on performance and cognitive function overall. Overall for nutrition, improving performance. So we can talk about, again, some of those specifics for pre-fueling for activity, during sport fueling too. That'll be included in part two. But when we have kind of a longer duration activity, we are burning through more energy, so we really want to make sure we're fueling enough before and during to help improve that performance overall. And then another big one is preventing injury. So if we are in a position where we are not getting enough energy, food coming in to support that recovery, we can really put ourselves in a position to potentially get injured, which we want to avoid. So then looking at the athlete's plate. So the next three plates or plate visuals are going to look pretty similar, but I'll kind of point out some of the big differences. So this easy training plate, we can see about a quarter of our plate carbohydrates, a quarter of our plate protein, and about half of our plate color, which color, think produce, fruits, veggies. The one part that's missing on here that kind of goes within some of these categories would be fat intake as well. So we do want to make sure we have some kind of fat source on our plate as well. Role of each of these, again, very briefly, but carbs are our body's preferred energy source. So we want plenty of carbohydrates or glucose for brain function, for our energy, muscles, and that is the big one we'll see between each of the plates really increase, because as exercise intensity increases, we are utilizing more and more carbohydrates or glucose for energy. Protein, building blocks for muscles and tissues. So we want to make sure we have plenty of protein throughout the day to help support muscle building, muscle repair. That muscle protein synthesis system happens over 24 hours. So we really want to have a consistent and regular intake of protein throughout the day. You'll see that this protein portion doesn't increase as activity intensity increases because it is not a big energy source for us. That would be our last resort energy. We don't want to dip into our protein stores for energy. So that one stays the same, but we really want to make sure we have a consistent intake to help support muscle building, muscle repair, and that lean muscle mass maintenance or maintaining what we do have. And then again, that produces the other side. So looking at our moderate training plate, so we can see here, carbs have increased a little bit, protein has stayed about the same. The colorful part of the plate has also shifted or decreased a little bit. Even the format of some of the colorful foods can be adjusted, and that might mean cooking them. So maybe the volume is a little bit decreased, just related to that cooking process. But again, carbs are increasing here. We're using more and more carbohydrates or glucose for energy as our intensity is increasing. So we really want to make sure we have plenty. That carb amount here can be a blend of both simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates. The simple carbohydrates are going to be a really fast energy source. So we want to make sure we have plenty of that prior to activity, but we can also throw in more complex carbohydrates that have a little bit more fiber to help sustain that energy too. And the timing with those is going to matter a little bit, and I'll touch on that in a couple slides. This is the hard athlete's plate. So we can see here now that half of our plate is carbohydrates. Again, increased intensity, increased utilization of glucose or carbohydrates. And on this plate, we want to see probably a majority of these carbohydrates coming from more simple sources. And a simple carbohydrate essentially is going to mean less fiber in that source. And the reason we want more simple carbohydrates is it is a faster energy source. We can break it down quicker, use it for energy sooner. We also know that having foods with a lot of fat, fiber, or protein are going to be slower digesting, and that can cause some GI issues during activity if we're having too much of those complex carbs or high fiber foods going into activity. Again, protein stays the same. The colorful portion is now about a quarter of the plate. So practical application of this would be a visual of the types of food and the portions that might exist of some of those. So again, half plate color here for the light training day. Moderate, we kind of break that down to more of like a third of the plate. And then hard training, we have a quarter for some of those colorful foods, and kind of the inverse transition with carbs. We're going to start with a quarter, increase to about a third, and then increase to about half of our plate. Again, protein stays about the same for each of those training days. So pre-workout fueling and timing of that. One, I always encourage, if you are in some kind of sport or an active individual, meeting with a dietitian is really helpful to find the best individualized plan. These are kind of big picture suggestions, but everybody's GI tolerance is a little bit different, so we do want to make sure that we're kind of playing around with this to see what fits the best for you. But in general, about 4 hours prior to activity, we can have a pretty normal meal at this time. We would want to have that hard training plate where a majority is carbohydrates, but we can still include things like protein and fat and some fiber, and generally tolerate that okay from a GI standpoint. As we get closer and closer to the competition or race or training session, we're going to want to have less and less of the fat, fiber, and protein. So the 2 hours before, we could potentially have another small snack, mostly carbohydrate dominant. We could probably still get away with something like a piece of toast with a little bit of peanut butter and a banana on there. So we have little bits of fat and protein, but mostly carbohydrates and something like that. And then the 30 to 60 minutes prior to activity, we want to shoot to have around 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrates. So this could be something like one banana the 30 minutes before. This could be doing 2 of the little like applesauce squeeze pouches about 30 minutes before. Could be doing about half a cup of fruit juice an hour before. So it can really be customized to, again, what feels the best for you. But this one is entirely carbohydrates we want to have prior to that event. And last note, again, being mindful of fat, fiber, and protein, as that can sometimes disrupt kind of our GI tolerance during activity. And then hydration. So pre-workout hydration. So number one is kind of determining your baseline hydration overall. That can be done utilizing our weight. It doesn't have to, but this kind of gets us in the ballpark. So you would take whatever your weight is in pounds, divide it by 2, and that's about how many total ounces we want throughout the day for hydration. Then from there, with activity, especially going into like an hour workout or a sports team workout or practice, we want to have an additional like 16 to 24 ounces the 2 hours prior to activity. So that equation on the left would be like, let's just say it was a 200-pound individual. Dividing by 2, that's about 100 ounces. So that would be our goal. The 100 ounces would be for the whole entire day. But pre-workout, we want to make sure we're having about 16 to 24 ounces in the 2 hours prior to activity. And that could potentially be an addition to that 100 ounces. Again, everybody is a little bit different on what they tolerate and what feels the best. So that's where meeting with a dietitian, especially somebody who specializes in sports nutrition, can be really helpful. And then these are a couple references that I used. As always, I want to thank KSB Community and Wellness for hosting these nutrition topics. Again, my name is Krista Loos. I'm one of the outpatient dietitians here. If you do have any questions, please feel free to send me an email. I'd be happy to chat with you about that. And then again, part 2 of the sports nutrition series will come in September, and we'll run through some things like during activity nutrition, recovery nutrition, and then hydration overall too. Thank you.